just so I don't forget in the next little bit. I've got the chat room open. Let me start recording. It is now recording. Good. So everybody, we are recording now. Please know that anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. That's a joke. I wouldn't use it against you. But thanks for being here tonight. Anybody have any questions on anything? We're going to be doing chapters 6 and 7 tonight. We'll kind of walk through these. I think chapter 6 is a little bit longer. Chapter 7 is a little bit shorter. This is kind of continuing on our looking at building brand equity, and we're in the part of the book where we're going to talk about marketing and using marketing tools. Tonight it's going to be about integrated marketing communications. I think maybe 2 of you in the room have had me for a previous class. There will be a little bit of crossover. The textbook we're using this semester does things a little bit differently. I'll share with you a few of my things. We're going to have a little bit more new material next week, but I will also, on my lecture, have a couple items that will not be in the textbook, and it's a couple branding processes that we've developed here at Newman Grace. But tonight we're pretty much going to track the textbook. I'm going to tell you a few of the things that I think will be very important for you to know and good for you to know for the for a midterm. And I'll also tell you a few things that you're not going to need for the midterm. The textbook, I think, takes a couple left turns, so I'll identify those along the way. I mentioned to a couple people in the room earlier, I'll just mention it again. I will have a homework assignment that I'll give you at the end. My apologies to you guys. Bad on me. I wrote out the assignment, but I didn't hit the publish button. So the assignment didn't get up there, and I didn't realize it. Because I was out of the office the last couple days, I was very slow at getting back on emails. So when I saw that, I hope you guys saw my email, I've extended the deadline. So if anybody didn't get to it because I was late on that, I've extended that a couple days. So you guys have a little bit more time on that. And again, it was really designed as a way of helping you on your brand research project. And tonight's homework will be the same thing. You'll be able to use it and apply it and put it right into your research project. So if there is nothing, we'll go ahead and go. I'm going to share my screen and we'll kind of jump in. And I will be surprised. What do I have on this? I don't know. We got about 14, 15 slides on one. I think 7 on the other. So I don't think it's going to be a real long night. But if I get moving and if the rock star starts kicking in and you guys need a break, holler, okay? Because I find I sometimes get on a roll and I forget to stop. But we might just be able to blow through and not even take a break and still get you guys out of here at a reasonable time. Okay, so let me. There we go. My menu went away for a minute. Can somebody please tell me if they see the screen that says IMC Integrated Marketing Communications? Is that it? Yes. Sorry, you guys are all now hidden behind my second screen. Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so integrated marketing communications. What are integrated marketing communications? Well, I'll show you a list in just a minute, straight out of the textbook. But integrated marketing communications is a new way, new in probably the last 40 years or so, of talking about the things that we do when we are involved in marketing that fall under the P of promotion in the 4 Ps. So these would typically be the things that we would look at that would be like advertising, public relations, promotions, event marketing, personal selling. All that stuff falls into integrated marketing communications. And just a brief history on this. Don't think of this in terms of like for a test. I just want to give you the background on why we've really started moving towards calling this IMC, or integrated marketing communications. So when I got out of school in the early 80s and I went to work at a big ad agencies, it was really the tail end of kind of the Mad Men era. And big ad agencies commanded a lot of power. If you go back to when agencies really first started getting strong, they really kind of probably got most of their power in like the 30s and certainly by the 40s, 50s, 60s. Most companies did not have marketing departments. They may have had sales departments, but they didn't really use the term marketing a lot. And companies would hire ad agencies, in essence, to be their marketing department. They'd say, you know, we make widgets and we know how to make them, and we have a sales force that sells them, but we don't really know how to get the word out to people. And so they would turn to ad agencies, and ad agencies would do the work. And the ad agencies would come back and say, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And the companies would say, okay. And sometime in the 1960s, people from those ad agencies began to get hired away from the ad agencies and started working for companies. And they started doing some of those duties inside, in the companies, instead of hiring out. So the work, the shift of the load of work began to change. Now, at the same time, you had PR firms, and large companies typically have ad agencies and PR firms. Small companies might only use one marketing communications firm. But there began to be a battle between the ad agencies and the PR firms. And back then, things like event marketing were not very big, so they weren't really anybody much to deal with. And the ad agencies wanted to get more of the dollars, and the PR firms wanted to get more of the dollars, so they were fighting over it. Back then, what an ad agency did is what an ad agency came up with, and what a PR firm did, a PR firm came up with, and the PR firm and the ad agency probably didn't talk to each other, which means the PR efforts were not connected to advertising at all, and the advertising was not connected to their public relations. They were not integrated. And so when companies started getting a little smaller, when companies started getting a little smarter and ad agencies wanted to gain some of that PR, they would start pitching to also do PR work. And the PR firms began pitching and saying they wanted to do more advertising work. We encountered this term, which was integrated marketing communications. Now, in the early days, it could be argued that it was really just a way of trying to get more work, more revenue out of the clients. But what we found over time is that integrated marketing communications works. So you take an ad or you take a PR campaign and you measure it one against the other. What we've learned is if they both mirror the same basic image and that image is on strategy, that the marketing efforts will be more successful when they are integrated and work together. If they use the same language, if they use the same logos, if they have the same strategy, we've actually found it's stronger. I began using the term integrated marketing communications in the 90s. That was the first time I used it in one of our brochures. And I have to be honest, it was too soon. Nobody knew what it was. But it's really come around, and it's something that we now have classes in. There are majors in those. I've taught in the IMC department at Pepperdine. There's some graduate programs around the country on this, and this is really sort of the way that we are moving. So that's a little bit of background on kind of where it came from. But what really is it? Well, I'm going to give you 2 slides on this. This is actually straight out of the book. This is literally a phone photo that I took out of the book that's at the beginning of chapter 6. By the way, yes, I will be posting my PowerPoint notes. So if you don't want to take a lot of notes, don't worry about it. I'd really rather most of this soak in. There will be some places where I think you'll need to take notes, but no, I will be posting all of my PowerPoints at the conclusion of this. But if we look at this list that was in the textbook, we see at the beginning, it says media advertising, and that's just a term that they're using here. But what do they mean by this in the textbook? Well, they mean television advertising, radio advertising, newspaper advertising, magazine advertising. Then they have a different category of advertising, direct response. Now, what do they mean by direct response? Let's touch base on that real quick. Media advertising, we're going to refer to as paid advertising. It is paid and it is placed. You pay for the advertising, you pay to put your ad somewhere, and you put it in a specific place. we will learn that some advertising, you don't get to do that. You pay for it, but you might not place it. Direct response advertising basically says, we're going to create an ad and we want people to respond to it right away and directly to us. So if you think of, excuse me, most billboard advertising, most magazine advertising, most television advertising, you see an ad and then the advertiser pretty much just hopes you like the product and then you'll buy it later. Whereas direct response advertising says, here's an advertisement for a product or a service and we want you to buy it now. So if you think of mail, direct mail, it's probably one of the biggest. It doesn't seem like it would be a lot now. It still is estimated to be somewhere between $30 and $50 billion a year, so it still is very large. Telephone, that can be actually telephone sales that we're talking about. And yes, broadcast media can be used, broadcast meaning television and radio, but I'll say a word and this will probably help you understand a little bit better. If I say infomercial, and I know you guys don't stay up very late at night, but if you ever did, and you turn on the television at 1 in the morning, you'd notice there's nothing good to watch, and there's advertisements for all sorts of crappy products. And they're long, long, long commercials, and they have 800 phone numbers, call, order now, save, operators standing by. That's actually broadcast media direct response. And you can do direct response in print, though we don't see that as much anymore. You used to see it a lot. Your parents probably saw it. Your grandparents certainly saw it. And those were things like coupons, where you actually got a scissors out and cut a coupon at the bottom of an ad, and you filled something out and you sent a check. Sounds super antiquated now, but I remember as a kid that was very prevalent. And of course, you can do that online very easily now. Click order now. What the textbook refers to as place advertising. So think of things like billboards, posters. The original term for this, people would refer to it typically as billboards, and everything kind of fell under that. And then in the 60s, 70s, 80s, we kind of referred to it as outdoor advertising. And then the new term for that is OOH, out of home advertising. But specifically, out of home can be anything that is out of the home. Place advertising is more specifically when you are putting an advertisement in a certain place that is not necessarily in your home. You're placing an advertisement in outside media, and it doesn't necessarily have to be outside, meaning out of doors, but not in your own home via a television or a radio or a computer screen or a magazine. So if you think of kiosks at malls, that's place advertising. When you see advertisements in a movie theater, on an airline, product placement kind of falls under that. I actually disagree with that slightly, but for the text, I'll go with that. Point of purchase advertising. Now that's a kind of advertising where you actually pay to place an advertisement in a store. I usually categorize this as a non-advertising promotion. You'll see that on a slide after this one. The textbook refers to this as point of purchase advertising. Can anybody tell me what a shelf talker is? Does anybody know what a shelf talker is? Anybody want to take a guess as to what a shelf talker is? You'd think that it's something that talks, but it actually isn't, or at least not most of the time. Shelf talker is simply when you're walking down the aisle of, say, Ralph's or Vaughn's, and there's a small advertisement that is usually stuck to a shelf. That's a shelf talker. It's just a very small advertisement in a store. Aisle markers are sometimes what we call end caps, when you're at the end of an aisle and there's a big display for a certain kind of product. That's usually a paid product that's sitting there. Great examples of this. In the springtime, the Super Bowl happens, and for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before, you will see many of the end caps will be filled with things like beer, soda, chips, dip, and companies like Frito-Lay or Budweiser pay grocery stores extra money to take their product and not only have the beer in the beer section, but have it on the end of an aisle. And they've learned that when you pay for that, many, many more people will buy the product there. That's point of purchase. You can also see the small advertisements that are on shopping carts. Sometimes you'll actually see small television screens. I've been to self-checkout centers where they actually played a little 8-second commercial before you started checking out. That's all point of purchase advertising. Trade promotions. So typically, as soon as we say the word promotion, it is related to advertising, but it is not always placed and it's not always paid for in the same way. Most of the time when we say promotions, it's going to fall under trade promotions or the next category up here, consumer promotions. Trade promotions are done between a company and a wholesaler and a dealer, but usually not with a consumer. And so you might do a promotion to get, if I was Monster Energy and I wanted to do a trade promotion, what I might do is I might do an advertisement that goes out in Grocery Store Manager magazine. And I would say, order 500 cases and we will reduce the price of Rockstar by 25%. You can make more money if you buy more Rockstar. That would be a trade promotion. So you can do this by creating deals, what they call buying allowances, like I just mentioned, display allowances, where you can say, well, I'm gonna, if you buy a certain amount, I'm gonna pay for a certain amount of display advertising to support your sales. You can do contests, you can do training programs. That's all trade. Now, the same things can happen with consumers. Those are consumer promotions. Things like sampling, coupons, premiums. So by sampling, what do we mean? My favorite one is you walk around Costco on a Saturday. This is obviously pre-COVID, and there's food samples of everything. And you get to try a sample. That's a promotion. Coupons, you guys all know what coupons are. Sometimes you get a very specific coupon. Sometimes it's just on the back of your receipt. My favorite examples of that are during the summer when you go to someplace like Starbucks and you buy a nice $3.85 latte in the morning. On many of your receipts, it will say, come back after 12 noon and get any iced drink for $2. That's what we would call a bounce back. It's a bounce back coupon. It's trying to get you to come back. If you see things like refunds or rebates, we see rebates on cars a lot. Sometimes we see it on things, electronic cell phones. Those are consumer promotions. Premiums. A premium is if you buy something and you get something with it. So buy a case of Budweiser and we'll give you a Budweiser hat for free. That would be a premium. Digital marketing. So the textbook sort of breaks this apart. I've grown to dislike the term digital marketing because technically television now is digital. Much of radio is digital. So I think this would be a little bit better if it said internet marketing, but the textbook says digital marketing, so I'll go with that. Search marketing, display advertising, social media, email, video, and blogs. Let's look at those just for a moment. When I say search advertising, what do I mean? Would somebody help me with what they think search advertising means? What is search advertising? Somebody take a stab at it. Where do you go to search for things?
Google?
Yeah, Google, right? So you go to Google and you put in a search, and the first 1, 2, or maybe 3 items that come up have the little teeny icon that says ad. That's a paid search advertisement, Google AdWords. So they're paying to come up when you search for a certain term. That's search advertising. A display ad, and this term is very common also in things like magazines, that's where they got the term from. What is a display ad on the internet? Would somebody help me with that? What is it, the difference between, we just found out what a search ad is. What is a display ad?
Isn't display the one where it's like if you search like smart water, it'll give you like the different options sold at different places?
It could be, but most of the time it's actually going to be even more simple than that. So you're not wrong, but as soon as I say 2 words with a hyphen in it, you'll get it. A pop-up ad, that's a display ad. Or if you go to a website, maybe along the top or along one of the sides, you'll see little ads, usually with a picture. And that's where that term display came from. So if you go back to things like newspapers and magazines 20, 30, 40 years ago, before we had Craigslist, before we had eBay, if you wanted to sell something like your car, you actually typed out or hand wrote an ad to the newspaper, and on Sunday they'd run an ad that we would call a classified ad. It was in the classified section. Now it might have a picture, but most of them didn't have it. It was just text. That was referred to as a classified ad. But if a company placed an ad in a front section or a sports section or a food section, and it had picture and it had artwork, we called those display ads. So most print vehicles like magazines or newspapers had both display ads and classified ads. Display now online just simply means an ad that takes up some space. It could be a square, it could be a box, could be a rectangle, could be tall. But any of those kinds of ads that just show up on a website or a pop-up, that's a display ad. So the big difference online, search ad, if you think about it, most Google search ads do not have pictures. They've been testing pictures and they've been testing videos, but they haven't really rolled it out nationally yet. Most Google search ads are text only. But if you think about display ads, they usually have a picture, maybe a little video, an animated GIF, something like that. Those are two of the big forms of internet marketing, or as the book calls them, digital marketing. Now, social media, when I teach advertising media, I'm teaching in advertising media this semester. Social media is not advertising media, but social media sells advertising on their media. So when you see that sponsored post on Facebook or on Instagram, that's a paid advertisement. But the post that the company makes just about their product, that's actually just social media. They're not paying for that. And know that that is an emerging type of marketing. A little bit later tonight, we're going to sort of change our terminology on that and say that when people are pushing content out there, a lot of social media marketing actually is now becoming what we're calling content marketing. Email is basically the new school version of direct mail. But instead of putting a stamp on it and sending it through the postal system, we just hit send. A lot of people like email marketing because the cost is very low. Downside to email marketing is response rates are very, very low. 5, 10 years ago, they were much higher. But what do most of us do now when we open up our email in the morning? You know, we've gone to sleep at night, we wake up kind of late, we go check our email, we get our phone out, we check our email, and what do? We go delete, 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 delete with all the crap that comes in. And so we're much more prone not to just open up every email. So email marketing effectiveness, unfortunately, has dropped, or I should say the open rates have dropped. Video advertising is very prevalent. Most of us see videos on things like YouTube. There's lots of different kinds of ads. The most common ones are what we call pre-roll, those small videos that we see before we see a YouTube ad. I would like to ask a question of each of you. What is the length of time when you go to YouTube to watch a video? This will actually be 2 questions. What is the length of time when you look at a video? I don't really care what it's for. It could be for your hobby. It could be just something funny that you've heard and you've searched for. What's the length of video that to you seems too long? Like when you look in that, the video comes up, an ad's coming up, and you look very quickly to see how long the video is. How long is too long for you guys right now? I like to ask this every semester just to sort of gauge it. Like, will you guys watch a 20-minute video on YouTube?
If it's over 30 seconds, I won't watch it.
So you're down into a really short time. Over the past 5 years, every semester I've seen it get shorter and shorter. And what you just said is I've heard from a number of people lately that were in that sort of under 1 minute zone. Um, I'm seeing longer than 8 minutes is too long. I think there's a difference between how long we will watch and also how, if we see something that's really long, we may not even start it. Like there's times I want to go and just see something that's just 1 or 2 minutes. And if it says 27 minutes, I'm like, no way, I'm not even going to start that because I don't want to lose 20 minutes of my time. So here's my second question on that. What percentage of ads on, say, Vimeo or YouTube, when you go to watch a video and that pre-roll video advertisement comes up first, what percentage of ads do you hover over the skip button, and when it counts down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, skip ad, how many of you hover over that skip ad immediately? Most of us, right? So as much as those are new and popular forms of advertising, in this room, I think everybody basically raised their hand and said, no, I don't really want to watch that. Now, I know we all do get sucked into it, and I don't know what the percentage would be for me. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 ads I'm actually interested in. But most of the time I'm like, nope, my finger's over that skip. I'm going to look around. I'm going to see what anything else other than watching that ad. And as soon as it says skip ad, I'm going to push that button. Blogging is also a form of content marketing, content internet marketing. Event marketing, sponsorships, I also call these experiential marketing. Things like sponsorships at sporting events or basically any kind of event, art events, entertainment, fairs, festivals. We'll talk a little bit more about some specifics on those. When we talk about mobile marketing, this is another area that I have a slight disagreement with the textbook. Mobile marketing, in my opinion, really describes the method of delivery of it, which means it's through a mobile device. It's not really a different kind of advertising because you can do promotions on a phone, you can do advertisements on a phone, you can do direct response. But when we say mobile, it's really a delivery method. And I'm in one slide, in 2 slides, I'll explain that just a little bit more. Then we have a couple of these other areas that fall under IMC: publicity, public relations, word of mouth, personal selling. This is straight out of your textbook in chapter 6. This is something that I've posted and I use in my classes. And again, if you see I put my name on it, that's not for ego. I put it there because you're not going to find this in a textbook. This is just a way I've learned over the years to explain integrated marketing communications. And I sort of break them down into these 7 areas, and almost any kind of marketing fits under these areas. So we have advertising of all types over on the left, including internet, including broadcast. I say paid and placed advertising is paid and placed advertising. They just land in different places. Then you have public relations. Public relations is a little bit different from advertising in that you pay a PR firm, but then they try to get you free placements. An example of that is if I'm Chevrolet, I hire a PR firm to reach out to magazines, to reporters, to bloggers, to influencers, and say, PR firm, I'm going to give you 20 new Dodge Silverado pickup trucks. We want you to lend them to influencers, to television stations, to reporters, have them drive our new pickup, and then write articles about it or talk about it on their shows. That's what you do in PR. So you're not paying to place it on a billboard, but you're paying a company to try and get what we call media placements on that. So the words are very similar, but it's actually 2 different ways of doing it. Also related in public relations, things like government relations, customer relations. You see 3 letters there. Remember, whenever I put 3 letters somewhere, that's a good one to know. It's probably going to show up on a test. Can somebody tell me what CSR stands for? Now for sure it'll be on a test. Corporate social responsibility. And that falls typically under the PR department. And by that, what we mean is corporate social responsibility is sort of a proactive way of companies to try and get on customers, governments' good side. And it is paralleled by the one that's right underneath it, crisis management. Crisis management is what PR firms have to do when bad things happen. If I was teaching a class at Woodbury on PR, I would walk you through a couple scenarios. One of which would be, oh, we want to come out with a new major at Woodbury, and we want to come out with a major which is a major entirely around internet marketing. We might want to hire a PR firm to put press releases out, to talk to the media, to run articles and news stories on this brand new major to try and get kids in high school to want to major in this and come to Woodbury. That would be a traditional way of using public relations. Now, what we might also do as a part of a PR department or a PR firm working for Woodbury, we might need to have them reach out to the city of Burbank, the county of Los Angeles, and deal with the government entities. I guarantee you right now, Woodbury has people probably talking on a daily basis to the county of Los Angeles about COVID and about what colleges and universities can and cannot do in terms of having classes. I haven't gotten this one from Woodbury yet. Pepperdine started 1 week ahead of Woodbury, and just yesterday I got Pepperdine's email that said, our winter session is going to be online, but our spring session, no matter what, we are going to be back on campus. I guarantee you that Pepperdine has a PR person who is working directly with the government saying, we want our campus opened up for the spring. That would be a PR function. Now, you would also likely have people at Woodbury who would be working proactively. Woodbury does things like they have alumni events. They have events for the community to come and check out things, maybe see an art exhibition at school, a fashion show. They're doing things to reach out to get the community to just feel good about Woodbury. Woodbury actually has a pretty good relationship with the neighborhood. I'll tell you, Pepperdine does not. A lot of people in Malibu hate Pepperdine. It's a big school. It's got a lot of kids. Some of those kids party, and a lot of the neighborhoods don't like that. So Pepperdine has to do some corporate social responsibility to try and get people to think more positively. And then if I were doing this at Woodbury, I might go through the scenario of what happens if we find out that a Woodbury student comes down with COVID, and then another student does, and then somebody from the faculty does. We would actually go into what we call crisis management, and we would have to try to manage the communications with the press. And we would call that crisis management. A scenario that I've done in classes before is a student from one of the sports teams is involved in a drunk driving episode and somebody is killed. You can almost guarantee that the press is going to come to school and say, we want to, who is it? We want to hear a comment about it. And the crisis management team in public relations would have to deal with that. So that's the two really big ones. Let's just kind of go through the others a little more quickly. Non-advertising promotion, that's back to those promotions that we spoke about, discounts, coupons, sponsorships, things like that. What the textbook doesn't really break out separately, but I do, is personal selling. And that's a form of integrated marketing communications. Training customer service people, training sales people, whether they're on the phone or in person, street teams, tech support, telemarketing. They're all involved in marketing communications. They have to say the right things to potential customers. Events and experiential, so that can be trade or consumer. It's things like sampling, test drives in a car, trying on clothes at a department store. That's all experiential marketing. If you don't have changing rooms at your store and you sell clothing, you are missing out on the opportunity for people to put clothing on and see how it looks on them. Seems really simple, but I've actually been to stores that had no way for you to try anything on. They're missing great opportunities on that. Experiential marketing and event marketing is rising very quickly. This is an area that we're seeing a lot of growth. One of the things that we know about experiential marketing is it can be expensive, but the flip side of that is it can be very effective. Getting somebody to try your product and then immediately offer them a deal is a great way to get people to switch brands. And then social media. Social media is really this new animal. We still don't really have it figured out from a marketing standpoint. There are some companies that are really doing well. A lot of companies that still haven't really quite figured out how to do that. And then I kind of have a catch-all that's down at the bottom, and that's for things like packaging, point of purchase, and the actual creation of brands from the standpoint of things like logos, logo designs, color schemes. So I'd like you to have just a good knowledge of what these are. In the second half of the semester, when you create your brand, you're going to need to create a marketing plan that uses these pillars. So as I mentioned the first night of class, typically the first half of my semester is more learning, and the second half of my semesters is more doing. Any questions on IMC before we plow forward? Anything? Okay. So how does IMC contribute to brand equity? Remember that a through line in this textbook is we want to try and build brand equity. We want to get people to like our brands more. We want them to buy our brands more. And that's where brand equity comes from. So these are typically the things that we see. The ones that are in black are in your textbook. I added 2 blue ones myself. That's why I put them in blue. But building brand awareness is probably the most important thing, or certainly the most common thing we see in IMC. We're trying to get people to be aware of our brands. We want them to know about our brands. The textbook, this is a little bit technical, but let's just, I'm going to break it down a little bit for you. Linking points of parity and points of differentiation in consumer minds. That's straight out of the textbook. Let me just simplify that a little bit. One of the things that we typically do in advertising is, if our product is not as popular as somebody else's product, we might compare our product to a more popular product. We might say, based on taste tests, our Ralph's brand macaroni and cheese tastes just as good as Kraft macaroni and cheese, but it costs half the price. That would be using points of parity, points of similarity to our advantage. I would say more often than not, as an advertiser, I'm looking for points of differentiation. And if I can tell people how or why my product is different from somebody else's, that's where I usually like to advertise. Points of differentiation, points of parity. And so what are we trying to do with IMC? We're trying to link if being the same as somebody else or being different from somebody else is valuable. And we're trying to do that in customers' minds. We're trying to create positive brand feelings. Sometimes we do that through music, through imagery. Sometimes we show demonstrations of the product. Think about a product like, well, let me do it a different way. Can you guys think of a product that their primary advertising and marketing communications focuses on that one? Not so much on brand awareness, but on creating positive brand feelings. Any products kind of pop into your mind? So when you see cars and you see advertising, what do you often see in car ads? Probably things like what kind of gas mileage they get, how many people fit in it, you know, how fast the car goes from 0 to 60. That's not necessarily, I mean, you may get positive brand feelings out of that, but that's really kind of brand awareness or points of parity or points of differentiation. If you think about computers, they usually talk about the hard drive size or the speed of the computer. Food, they might talk about nutrition. Think about somebody like Coca-Cola. What does Coca-Cola say in their advertising? if you think back to many of their different campaigns, they've said things like, have a Coke and a smile. I mean, they just want you to feel good. Share a Coke with a friend. They're not saying it tastes better. They're not saying it has more sugar than Pepsi. They're not saying it has less sugar. They're really just trying to create very positive brand feelings. They know they're in the marketplace, so they don't really have to make you super aware, but they want you to equate happy times, happy feelings, going out on a date, a family reunion, going on vacation, and drinking Coke. They want you to feel good. And if you have those positive associations, you're more likely to buy Coca-Cola. Improving brand resonance, that really comes out of the chapter a couple chapters ago, this idea of brand resonance. Does a brand, I like switching that word out and saying brand relevance. I think it's basically the same thing as brand resonance. Are there brands that just kind of speak to you, that have meaning for you? I had a meeting with a student earlier today, and she was telling me that one of the things that really resonates with her is when a company puts a real effort towards things like sustainability. They don't like the companies that are much more wasteful in things like their packaging, or that they're using products that cannot be recycled in any way. Well, for her, brand resonance is sustainability. And when she finds companies that work towards that, like a Patagonia, then that brand resonates with her and she's more willing to pay more just to get that brand. I would also say there's a couple other things that we could add to this that IMC contributes to. The more we do advertising and promotion, the more likely people will recall our brand, what we call brand recall, and the more they will likely prefer our brand preference. So one of the tricks in advertising is to try and get people to remember your brand. And if they don't remember your brand, they can't buy it. They can't prefer it. But if you get them to remember it, then at least you stand a chance for them to buy it or prefer it. And I think that's a big part of IMC, trying to get people to remember your brand. And then ultimately, what do we really want advertising and promotion to do? We want people to buy the brand. We want them to buy our product. So those are the things that we're really looking to try and do. Now, the textbook identifies, you would think this is easy. You create an ad, you say something, and you show it to people. But it's not as easy as that. This slide right here describes the challenge, one of the big challenges we have in marketing our brands. Now, it's a very simple slide. That's one of the reasons I like the way the textbook describes this, but it's actually kind of a complicated topic. Not complicated, but it's a challenging topic. You notice the numbers there, they look like they're almost out of order. And the way the textbook says this is, there are things that people currently know about our brand. That's number one. Number two, there are things that we as the brand would like people to know about our brand or think about our brand. Number three is we need to find a way of telling people about the brand that we'd like them to know. And in fact, that fits somewhere in between where our brand currently sits in the minds of our customers and where we want it to sit in the mind of our customers. So we went through this exercise a few weeks ago where I asked people about if you had good feelings about a brand or bad feelings about a brand. This is exactly what we were talking about. You might have good thoughts about a brand. Well, in that case, the brand probably doesn't want to change your opinion. But what if you have bad thoughts about a brand? So you might have purchased a food product at the store. Let's say you purchased a spice for a certain recipe. And you go home and you cook the meal, and somebody else goes into the kitchen while you're not there. They taste it, they think it needs more, and they put more of the spice in. And then you don't like it. It really wasn't the brand's fault. It may have been somebody else's fault. But now you have a bad image in your mind of that brand. Ooh, I don't like that spice. It's too strong for me. And so what would the brand want? The brand would basically say, no, it's not too strong. You probably use too much. It tastes great in the right amounts. And so they have to find a way of doing that. This is before most of your time, but there was a, there may be still around, a shampoo called Prel. And it came in a tube like a toothpaste. And it was a kind of a clear tube, and it was green gel shampoo. And they used to use the term a dab or a dollop of that shampoo was all you needed. And they'd put a very small amount in the palm of somebody's hand in a video shot, and then they'd show the person, you know, lathering up their hair. And basically, most people thought you needed to use a lot of shampoo to shampoo your hair. And they were using a concentrated formula, so they had to teach people, oh, you get to save money because you only need a little teeny dab of the shampoo to wash your hair. So the communication that they chose was to actually create terminology to change what people thought about how much shampoo you needed and how much you needed of their brand of shampoo. So the textbook refers to this as kind of like the test of effectiveness, that we kind of need to move through where a current brand is, where we want it to be, and to create some kind of advertising that gets us to that desired brand knowledge. They also have in the textbook what they call the information processing model, and what they're really saying in this, let me give you a quick citation on this for those, because we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. I should have written it on that page. On page 187, information processing model of communications. And by this, what they're saying is, number one, exposure. People must see or hear your communications for them to be able to process what you are saying. Number two, they need to not only see or hear it, but they need to sort of pay attention to it so they can process what the information is. Now, even if they're trying to process it, they may understand what you're saying or they may not. So they have to comprehend it before they can really buy your product. I find that's an issue with a lot of technology products. If a brand starts talking too techy, I'm not good at following that. Number four, yielding. The person has to sort of respond to the messaging in order to get them to have the positive feelings about it and hopefully eventually buy it. The textbook indicates that number 5 on this list is then they have to have an intention to buy the product. Now, sometimes that intention might happen very quickly. Sometimes it might take a while, but somebody has to plan to buy it or want to buy it before they actually buy it. And then the last one, number 6 on the information processing model, is the behavior of buying the product. That's the ultimate test of the information or the integrated marketing communications that we put out. So the last 2 slides have sort of been technical communications theory on how integrated marketing communications work. We're not going to get any more technical than this. The textbook does get a little bit more so, but these are the things that I kind of want you to focus on. Textbook then goes on and says, if you want to lump these into categories, we really have sort of 3 main areas to look at. Now, we have all those different kinds of advertising, promotion, PR that are on that big long list, but they kind of get lumped into 3 main areas: advertising and promotion, interactive marketing communications, and events and experiential. I'm just going to tell you that these overlap. So don't think of these as being super cut and dry, but I think the discussion is still kind of a good discussion. Let's go a little bit further and then we'll actually sort of come back and identify a few more items. I'm literally following the way the textbook goes, and the textbook bounces a little bit, but I'm going to kind of hit the high points on the way the textbook identifies this. So the textbook talks about the concept of positioning a product as a part of your IMC process. Well, what do they mean by that? Well, all they're really saying is we should analyze, and in fact, I will give you a citation on this. Figure 6.3 in your textbook on page 190 talks about this. And what it's saying is one of the first things that we need to do is we need to look at the competition. We need to look at the market. I would also add to that, you should not only look at the target market, but let's redefine that and say the target audience, the people. What do they know about us? What is the competition doing right now? We need to analyze that before we can really create strong messages. And then we would look at things like points of parity, what things are the same. Most of the time in advertising, we don't dwell on the things that are the same. And ideally, we're also looking at the points of differentiation, and that's where most advertising focuses, how one product is different than another. So if this were an advertising class and we were going to create ads, I would suggest to you, follow this process. Start with the market, start with the competition, start with the people that you're selling to, and look at your product in relation to those. From there, you're going to want to find out where your product is very similar to others, which is not a great place to sell from. Find out where your product is different, and I would also add the word "and better" or more valuable than your competition. And almost every time, that is the basis for a good ad. You show me an ad that doesn't work, and the chances are they're not advertising a point of differentiation. Now, following that, we have sort of 3 categories of strategy that can come out of this. And again, this is going to sound a little technical, but I'm going to try and make this very simple. The first one, an informational strategy. These are basically very direct and rational advertisements. So underneath that, if you look at those items, here's my explanation of that. Think of ads where they talk about a problem and the product solves it. Oh, little Johnny on the soccer team got his jersey really dirty. I don't know if regular laundry detergent is going to help clean this, but our new laundry detergent with super color brighteners will fix it every time, and now Johnny can be the star of the soccer team. Problem solution, really straightforward, informational. Demonstrations of how a product works. Think of the demonstrations of 2 paper towels. One soaks up the liquid that's spilled and the other doesn't. That's an informational strategy. Product comparisons. Somebody saying, you know, I use this product and it was great for me. Those sound boring. They actually tend to work really well if you have a big point of differentiation. Information strategies can be very powerful for a brand. I think they tend to be good when a product is new and not well understood. Don't try to be too clever. Be straightforward and explain to people what the product does. If people don't understand what it does and they're not familiar with it, your first step, in my opinion, is to be informational. A second type of strategy, fancy name for it here, transformational. Just think of the word imagery. Think of the word imagery. So the textbook uses as 2 examples of this. Maybe you create an advertisement that talks about typical usage. Typical usage of a product. Oh, do you want to spice up your macaroni and cheese? Use our new ultra hot pepper and put it in. And you see somebody try it and their eyes light up. You're using imagery that makes them feel good about it. Or another way of doing this is to highlight a typical user of the product. Highlight the person. Well, I'm a college student and I don't have a lot of time, so I need a computer that works really fast so I can get done with my homework quickly. That's why I choose the MacBook Pro Plus 27. Creating imagery either by identifying typical usage of a product or typical users. If you're a college student and you're getting a new computer, you might see yourself in that typical user. And then the third strategy that the textbook identifies is what they refer to as motivational. Now, this is where, again, I don't love the terminology, but let's go with it. Borrowed interest is a term that basically means we're going to try to interest you using something and then have you associate it with our brand. That's a very technical way, but here's an easy way of thinking of it. Humor, funny advertisements. Let's get people to laugh a little bit. They're going to feel good. And then they might associate that laughter and feeling good with our brand. Sex appeal is one of those. You arouse somebody's interest by, a really hot guy, a really hot girl there. When I teach advertising classes, I suggest that we think of sex appeal not just in the very literal sense of sex appeal, but I also substitute the word aesthetic appeal. Think of great food advertising. What does great food advertising usually do? It involves great food photography. It makes the food look great. Aesthetic appeal to food. What's another product that does that, I think, a lot of the time? Car advertising. They make the cars look really good. Most of the time when you see a static shot of a car, it's not dead sideways and it's not straight on, it's at a quarter angle. And we've pretty much determined that's the sexiest angle for a car to be in when we photograph it. Another product category that uses aesthetic appeal or sex appeal, in my opinion, jewelry. Gorgeous photography of an expensive watch or an engagement ring. Sex appeal, aesthetic appeal. In my mind, they're basically the same thing. They're getting us to see something and then feel very attracted to that. Music is another borrowed interest or motivational. If you hear a jingle that is somebody, a popular musician or group right now, a popular hit, when Apple used the Beatles' Revolution, that was huge. And they probably, with one commercial, grabbed half the baby boomers in the country just by using that jingle. People had rarely heard Beatles music in advertisements. It was a great way for Apple to gain attention with their target audience, which was a lot of baby boomers and Gen X. Fear is another one of those. There are others that we can use, but that's sort of a basic look at three strategies, three of the primary strategies that we might use for our messaging with our integrated marketing communications. So the textbook then kind of goes back and it says, well, what about advertising? What about promotion? And I'm just going to, because I mentioned most of this before, we don't have to spend too long on here. Advertising is typically paid and placed. So television and radio advertising, print, which is magazine and newspaper, what the textbook calls place advertising, direct response, those are all paid and placed. Promotions or other things, they can be a part of advertising or they can be separate. If you go to Starbucks, they might hand you a coupon, or sometimes they might put a coupon in an advertisement. I don't go to Bed Bath & Beyond, which is the closest place to me that sells Nespresso coffee cups. We have a Nespresso maker because I like espresso in the morning, and I'm sick and tired of using the espresso maker, so I just use a Nespresso now. I buy it using a coupon on my phone from Bed Bath & Beyond. So technically it's an advertisement. It's a direct response ad they send to me via email. They put a coupon in it. I go to Bed Bath & Beyond and I save 20% when I buy my coffee there. I won't buy my brewed coffee there or my ground coffee there. I only buy the Nespresso, but I use the coupon every time I go. That's the way these kind of overlap a bit. Now, the textbook, I don't think does a great job of identifying all of the different interactive, but I mentioned this to you before. Think of things like mail, direct mail, email, infomercials, search advertising, display advertising, email advertising that we see on the internet. Those are all forms of interactive and response-oriented advertising. And then events and experiential. With events, you can start by creating a marketing campaign around an existing event. Think of your local 10K in your neighborhood. You could go have a booth there, hang a banner there, and that would be marketing at an existing event. When a major brand goes and has a physical presence at a Super Bowl or at a Dodger Stadium, they're actually working with an existing event. Or brands could do the second one down the list. You can create your own events. You can create an event where people come to you. One of my favorite examples of that was a number of years ago. I got invited, I got something in the mail, and we went down to where the Forum is and where the new football stadium is. At the time, it was Hollywood Park. And there was a Saturday where you could drive BMWs, Lexus, and Audis. And they had about 20 of each, and they had little tracks roped off. And it was actually put on by Lexus. And they wanted you to drive their car versus the BMW and the Audi because they believed it was a better driving car. They just created an event. You went down there, you put on helmets, you got to drive the cars really fast. They had food. It was a really cool event. They owned it. It was theirs. It was a created marketing event. Sampling is considered an experiential marketing. So you can do sampling by things in fashion magazines. It might be a cologne or a perfume with a scratch and sniff. It could be going to Costco and sampling the Jimmy Dean sausage that they're cooking up at the end of the aisle. Test drives, what I call try-ons, going to a store and trying some clothing on. When you go to an open house where they're selling a house, a walkthrough, those are all types of experiential marketing. If we had to buy houses based just on pictures, we probably wouldn't buy houses as easily as we do. Actually going to a house and seeing it. And then what do we do when we look at a house or a condo? We go, oh, I could put my desk there and I could put my bed there, and we begin to visualize it. That's one of the reasons why experiential marketing works so well. And then sponsorships really typically fall under this type of marketing. You could also argue that sponsorships could be a form of a paid promotion, a placed promotion. The textbook puts it here. I probably wouldn't ask you a question on a test that would screw you up on this, but just know sponsorships are one of those that are in there. Sponsorships can take on a lot of different looks. Sponsorships can be very, very, very direct. My bicycle client sponsors racers. They sponsor people. Those people race on my clients' bicycles. They wear my clients' logos all over them when they race downhill races, bicycle races, BMX races. That's one kind of sponsor. Another is there might be an event and you might just pay to, and you send them banners and they hang up your banners somewhere near the event. So sponsorships can be very specific. They can be very general. What is good about a sponsorship? Well, sponsorships have what we sometimes call the halo effect. If people like the event or they like what's being sponsored, they might like your brand on it. Think of sponsorships like the paid sponsorships at Dodger Stadium when they show an ad on the big screen, and they might show an ad for a Dodger dog and a Coca-Cola. That sponsorship might be very valuable because you might then want to go buy a hot dog and drink a Coca-Cola. But also know that sponsorships, they can be very small by comparison. Sometimes you sponsor a local charity event and you're really sponsoring it and it makes you feel good, but you may not make a lot of sales out of it. But it all falls under experiential. And then I've really only got one more slide after this for this part, and what they call brand amplifiers. That's just kind of a fancy term for things like public relations, publicity, word of mouth, buzz marketing. Once you are doing advertising and promotions, things like public relations and publicity become a great add-on integrated marketing tool. So if you have ads out there, plus you can get influencers to talk about your product, websites to feature your product, news reporters to feature your product, television shows, Jimmy Kimmel, or you can get on Big Bang Theory and have people see your product. It's a great way to amplify your brand message. So when you pay for advertising, you get what you pay for, and that's it. But if you can do these other things that create word of mouth, WOM, or buzz marketing, it really can become a powerful thing. So the last part that I would like you to just simply be aware of and have an understanding of, the textbook calls this the 6 C's for efficiency and effectiveness of integrated marketing communications. I put a little explanation beside the first 5 of these. The 6th one is pretty easy. One of the things they suggest you look at for any kind of marketing communications program you do, like an advertising program, look at the coverage. In other words, look at who is going to be reached by this. And if it's not your target audience, it may not be a good place. I can't tell you the number of times I've had a client come to me and say, I want to run an ad on this radio station, or I want to run a billboard, on this street. Well, if your target audience isn't there, you're probably going to waste money. So it's good to know what kind of audience is covered by your advertising or promotion campaign. Textbook then uses the term contribution. And by that, what they're saying is, can it help create, or has it helped create a desired response? Can the advertising actually really work? And so an example of that might be, if you think about a cooking product, let's go back to our spice. That might be a lot easier to do with something like sampling or to sponsor a cooking show rather than, say, maybe a billboard. It's kind of hard to get a real feel for flavor on a billboard. And so when you're looking at different types of marketing, you want to make sure that the marketing can create a message that will have the desired response. I often say, if you need to hear it, it probably should be on television, radio, or the internet. If you need to see it, you probably shouldn't be looking at radio. Those are very simple ways of sort of looking how a message can contribute to a response. Textbook then refers to what they call commonality. Can you create different types of advertising and promotion that still have the same basic message? Will the same message work on radio as it works on television? Will it work on the internet? Will it work in direct mail? A good campaign will work across. Then this is a word I'd never seen before this textbook, complementarity. Complementarity. And what they're saying is, can the messages work together potentially with other messaging? And the textbook identifies this as things like, can your magazine ads work with billboards to actually make them stronger? Let me give you an example of this that you might have seen. When you study different types of media, you find that some work very well together, some not as well together. A lot of pharmaceutical ads do television campaigns. They show somebody with an affliction, a skin disease. They talk about a medicine that can make your skin respond to it and clear up and not itch. But there are certain regulations for that kind of advertising, and it takes a long time to talk about those. Those are those, when you see those ads and then the guy starts talking really fast and says, by the way, taking this product may kill you, it may give you horrible diarrhea, it might give you a stomach ache, and you start hearing all these terrible things. Well, what they found is, instead, they can make a reference and say, to learn more about this drug, look for our ad in People magazine. And then in the ad in People magazine, they talk about all the bad stuff because they know, honestly, a lot of people aren't going to read it. And so that's where 2 different types of media can complement each other. Another term that the textbook uses is conformability. Can a message be adapted to work with different consumers? Here's an example, a very simple example of using this. Can a message work for both people who know about your brand and who don't know about your brand? That's a challenging one. That's a tough one to do. I usually find that you need to do one kind of message for somebody that doesn't know anything about your product and a different message for people who know and maybe like your product. Another way of looking at that is, can you create an ad that works for people who don't like your product as well as the people who do like your product? In my opinion, that's really hard to do, and that's usually 2 different ads. And then ultimately, you need to do a cost analysis. Television's a great medium. It's also one of the most expensive ones. So you need to be able to justify that. Okay, so that's our look at the concept of integrated marketing communications to build brand equity. We're going to suggest that we look at all these tools, that we understand some of the strengths and weaknesses. I will ask you to review in this. We didn't spend time on this tonight, but the textbook identifies some strengths and weaknesses of some of these different things. Not all of them, but it'll talk about television, newspapers and magazines, place advertising, and digital advertising. It would be good for you to sort of have a good understanding of a strength and weakness of each of those. I'll just give you a couple of them very quickly. What is a strength of television? Well, because there's motion, there's visual, and there's sound, it's great for demonstrations. It's great for showing things in action. It's great for showing a before and after. It's great for seeing the grease clean up very quickly that's, you know, caked on inside of an oven or something like that. What's a downside to television? Well, it can be very expensive, one of the most expensive ways to advertise. This year, the Super Bowl will cost $5.5 million for a 30-second ad. That's pretty darn expensive. Think about newspapers or magazines. One of the things that's really good about that is it's good if you're looking for a static visual, a picture that doesn't move. Billboards are also good at that. But maybe it's not as good. A lot of newspapers don't use color. If you need color, probably don't want to use newspapers. Another problem with magazines, right now, I'm placing advertisements in December and January issues. Magazines are placed very far in advance because the magazine has to be laid out, then it has to be printed, then it has to be mailed. So that's a downside to it. So know that with any kind of media communications, you're going to have some positives and some negatives. Don't worry about having to try and memorize all of these. When we do our review for the midterm, I'll give you a handful of them that I think would be good to know. But you can apply a lot of common sense to most of these. So that's a look at integrated marketing communications as a way of building a brand. Using these, think of these as tools, and you now have this arsenal of tools that you can potentially use. Anybody have any questions on this? Okay, here's what I'm going to ask you guys this. I'm going to stop sharing this. And let me just look at my other file. So chapter 7 goes into branding in the digital age. And I'm going to open this up and I'm going to look real quick. And I'm going to let you guys that are on camera make the decision. So this, my PowerPoint for this is only, well, it's about 14 slides, and it will be a lot faster than the last one. I'm going to suggest, whereas that took 45 minutes, close to an hour, this might take 20 minutes. Would you guys like to take a break now, come back and do 20 minutes, or would you like to just plow through? Those who would like to just keep going right now, can I see by a thumbs up? Those of you that would like to take the break? Okay, so if you want to take a quick break, I will start slowly, but everybody else in the class, I think everybody but one or two of you said, let's just go forward. So I'm going to do that so that we can just kind of roll through this and get through it. Then I'll give you guys your homework assignment. We'll be done for the night. So as we move forward, this is kind of a follow-up. It's going to be integrated marketing communications, but as it relates to digital. So a few statistics just so that we understand how powerful digital is. I don't think you guys need a big lesson on this. You guys live this every day. 97% of consumers use search engines like Google when buying products. That's not only 9 out of 10, that's 97 out of 100. That means almost everybody. 10 years ago, that number was way, way, way less than that. Our buying habits have changed. 96% of consumers search for products on mobile devices. I will tell you that these numbers, I think, are a little bit high, but not a lot. The numbers that I've seen most recently say that about 88% of people use smartphones, about 93% use cell phones of any kind. So this is pretty close. When it says 96, it might be a tad high, but the basic point is there. We are using mobile devices. An old school, not so mobile device is now a laptop. Most of us aren't even using desktops anymore. Some of us do, but even a laptop is now considered large compared to this. 95% of millennials expect brands to have a Facebook presence. I didn't get the numbers for what that would be for things like Instagram, but I bet it's pretty darn high. There's an expectation that a brand needs to be there to be relevant. 89% of consumers do online research before purchasing in a store. So if you look at that first one, 97% of consumers are probably using Google when buying products. They might buy online, but even if they're going to go to a store, 9 out of 10 people still look for products online. They might look for pricing or sizing or colors. So we know the power of digital marketing is there. We can't deny it. For years, traditional media has tried to deny it. We cannot any longer deny it. Straight out of your textbook, table 7.1, I'll give you a page reference for those that want to look at it directly. Page 220, 220, table 7.1. I'm just going to read these very quickly. What are some of the trends that we're seeing? Well, we're seeing trends that are changes in the consumer decision journey. Decision journey is what the textbook refers to as, you know, we basically used to say, I need a product. You went to a store, do you have the product, and you bought it. Well, now you might see the product. You might want the product. You may want to think about the product. You may want to see what other people write about the product. You may want to go to Amazon and read reviews of the product. You may want to hear what an influencer says about the product. You might want to look at pictures of the product. You might want to look at videos of the product. Our journey as consumers has just gotten a lot bigger. It's a lot different journey than it was 50 years ago. There's a big increase in people buying online. We all know that. There's a shift in advertising and promotion spending for digital advertising. We're seeing that. In 10 years, we've seen digital advertising go from being about the 4th or 5th largest category to probably the largest, if not the largest, then a close second. The only thing that's close to it in total spending is television. We've seen huge amount of dollars swing to digital marketing and advertising. We've seen the rise of what we're going to call many-to-many communications. I'll show you a slide on that in just a moment. Dramatic increase in consumer touch points, increase in data availability, use of digital personalization, a loss of control of brand messages. I'll get to that in a moment as well. Our user experiences are different. If you think about user experience, when you go to a store, your user experience means you walk in the store, what it looks like, what it smells like, how they treat you. User experience now means, what's the website like? Is it easy to find a product? Can you see the product in different ways? One of the things that I learned working with a client for an online boutique that they had was, you show one picture, your sales are going to be much lower compared to if you show 5 or more pictures. If you're showing clothing, you can show it static, but you're going to sell more if you have at least one picture of the product being worn. And even better than that, not only a picture of the product being worn, a video clip of a person wearing the product, like a dress or a sport coat or a pair of jeans. Show the product by itself, you'll sell some. Show many pictures of the product, you'll sell more. Show a picture of the person wearing the product, you'll sell more. Show a video in addition to all that of the person wearing it, probably spinning, doing a 360, you're going to sell more. So the actual user experience is changing. And then the last one it talks about is the growth of brands as cultural symbols. I'm not sure that I agree with that, only because I think brands have been cultural symbols for a long time. Apple is a cultural symbol of kind of cool technology. Mercedes-Benz is a symbol of luxury cars. BMW is a symbol of ultimate driving machines. Chevy and Ford are symbols of American-made cars. Budweiser is a symbol of, you know, kind of America's beer. I think those have been around a while. So I agree that they can be cultural symbols. I just think they've kind of been around for a long time. So here's how the communication in digital is a little bit different. So this is, again, straight out of the textbook. I even kept the citations here, figures 7.3, 7.4. But what we're talking, oh, shoot, you guys, I'm not sharing it. I'm talking. I'm so sorry. Let me go back real quick. I clicked on it and I just realized it didn't click through. So just so you know, the statistics are on there. The list of the digital trends are on there. And this is where I am here. So I'm sorry about that. You guys can see that chart right now, can't you? Yes? Okay. So I know it's a little bit small, but it's a very simple chart. So if you think of the brand, if you think about the way we communicated with customers 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we just sort of shot messages out there. We had billboards out there, we had television out there, we had radio, we had newspapers. And the truth of the matter is we didn't really care what consumers said. We broadcast our messages. Well, if you and we call that sort of one to many. One brand would speak to many people through a television commercial. But as soon as we got into the internet, that changed. And we first noticed what we would call one-to-one communications. That we might create an advertisement and television might be seen by 1 million people at one moment. In one 30-second period of time, 1 million people might see it. But if Omar goes on to Google at 9 o'clock at night and Louisa goes on at 10 o'clock at night, they might see the same ad, but it's an hour apart. And that's sort of one brand talking to one person at a time. Then the other interesting thing is when you're talking one-to-one online, you can actually talk back and forth. When you have things like customer service, question and answer, your ability to email. If you think about it, television commercials 20, 30 years ago, there was really no way to reach out to the company, or not an easy way. You could write a letter, be lucky if you heard back in months. You mostly just either liked what you saw in the ad and you went and bought it, or you didn't. But now you can email questions. Do you make this in blue? Do you make it in red? Do you make it in my size? Will you give me a discount if I order 5? You can have that conversation when it's one-to-one. But then we also, as we studied it, we realized there's something else going on. And we can actually have many brands speaking to many people, and they're not only speaking to the brands, they're speaking to other people. So think of Amazon, for example. Many, many different products being advertised to many, many, many different people. And not only can those people ask questions of the people selling the products, but they can talk to each other. They can read reviews by each other. So if you think of this, the dynamics of the communications in trying to create brand equity, trying to get people to like your brand, the dynamics of communication have gotten a lot more complicated. It's not just put out a commercial and shove it out there and everybody's going to come and buy your product. You now have to deal with understanding that you're not really talking to masses. You're talking to masses, but one at a time. And so that's why we find the people that have been very successful online have figured this out. They're not talking to people like cattle. They're talking to people on a one-on-one basis. Another key thing is they've had to learn how to listen. So what was described in those trends, we also have more touch points. So it used to be that if I wanted to buy a food product, about the only place I could learn about it was if I saw an ad or I went to a grocery store. But now I can go to their website. I can go to their blog. I can go to their social media. I might hear about a product through an influencer, through somebody else's blog. There's many, many, many other places I can see, learn about, or gain information about brands than I could 20, 30 years ago. You're going to see that's going to be really important in just a moment. There's also a lot more digital channels. If you think of a website as sort of a digital channel, well, there's 1 billion websites out there. About 500 million of them are not even functioning. People start a website and then they abandon it. But that still means there might be somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 million to 500 million websites out there that you have access to. When I was a kid growing up, we had 7 television stations. That was it. In Los Angeles, it was Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 7, Channel 9. and channel 11 and channel 13, 7. How many cable channels do we have now? Hundreds, potentially thousands. How many websites are there? Millions of them. So there's many, many different ways. This has also created vast amounts of data, huge amounts of data. The movie called The Great Hack that talks about how Cambridge Analytica manipulated Facebook, manipulated other types of social media and advertising, and had a dramatic influence on the Brexit vote in England and our last presidential election. In that documentary from about a year and a half ago, they came across the statistic that said that Facebook has an average of 500 data points on every one of us. What you like, what you don't like, who you know, postings that you've liked, they keep record of every one of those. So they have lots and lots and lots of data. They know if you like clothing and fashion. They know if you like food. They know if you like cocktails. They know if you like other people. They know if you don't like them. They know if you like going to Target. They know if you don't like going to Walmart because of the way you've acted on social media. And then the other thing that we've been able to do is through digital marketing, we've been able to personalize things. It's really easy. It's very expensive to personalize direct mail. I can do it. I can send out 1 million letters and have every one of them addressed to one individual person, but that takes programming. I can do an email and I can do a merge mail list that does 1 million people in about 5 minutes. I can personalize those messages. So this is, I think, a kind of a critical concept for you as young marketers going forward and understanding the marketplace that you're moving into as potential employees, entrepreneurs, marketing managers, and even CEOs of companies. So the big brands that were, let's say, Ford and Chevrolet and Budweiser and Coca-Cola and Marlboro cigarettes, the big brands of 40, 50 years ago, they did used to broadcast messages. It was one-way communication. They just pushed it out there and we all fell in line. We watched it and then we went and bought the products. But think about it now. I touched on this a little bit earlier. We might say what a brand is. A brand can generate its own information about its brand. Consumers might have the way they think about a brand. And media can change the way everybody thinks about a brand. And all those combined form to be what is understood about a brand identity, a brand character. The better you are at marketing communications, the more what you say will be a part of that. But if a lot of people talk about your product, they're going to create a lot of meaning and understanding of a brand. So you don't have the control that you did when you were Coca-Cola 40 years ago, because people now can say what they want. Every one of you could start a blog. If we were teaching a digital marketing class right now, in a half an hour, every one of us could start a brand new blog and we could say whatever we want about any product. There was no place to say that 20, 30, 40 years ago. Now, I could have created a blog 15, 20 years ago. It was very expensive to do. Now it's absolutely free. And you can do it that fast without knowing any computer programming. So brands have kind of lost control of that. I should have brought my keys in here. I don't have my keys. Let's pretend this tape is a key, set of car keys. One of the ways that I like to dramatize this is brands have handed the car keys of communication to consumers. Consumers are controlling much of the conversation now. A brand can come out with advertising, but if people don't believe it, they'll call them on it. So consumers have a lot of say in the creation of brands right now. That should be both a concern of us as marketers and of people who own brands, but it also provides opportunity. If we understand it, I'll use the term judo. I sometimes refer to this as judo marketing. Instead of karate marketing where you're trying to hit somebody and kind of knock them out or knock them dead with your advertisement. Judo's philosophy is go with the momentum. And that's how I feel like we are looking at brand marketing these days, is finding momentum that's in the marketplace. Don't try to convince a lot of people that don't like your product to like it. Instead, find the people who don't have an opinion yet and convince them. Or if people say they really want an inexpensive product, don't try to shove an expensive one down their throat. Maybe you come out with a less expensive one and work with them and momentum in the marketing place. But the reason for this is we do not have the same control of our brands in the market that we used to, because consumers have so much. So a term that we use for this right now is brand engagement. Brand engagement. This is also a term that we're going to use in internet marketing a lot, social media a lot. If you've done any work in social media, the hottest term out there is engagement. So we not only want people to follow us on social media, we want them to share our content, to like our content, to comment on our content. That's all combined what we call engagement. Well, it's the same thing with a brand. And so I'll show you in a slide a thing called a brand pyramid, but 3 key things I want you to look at. Think of brands where people don't really care much about a brand. I'm not sure what a great example of that might be. The one that I usually fall back on is salt or pepper. Does it really matter what brand of pepper you buy? If you're a chef, it might matter. But for most of us, like, pepper is pepper, right? You buy some pepper, you have it. Heck, when I was in school, hate to admit this, but we probably, took as many pepper things from a restaurant that we could take, little packets of pepper, so we didn't have to buy it. We didn't really care about a brand. We would call that a low brand engagement. Well, maybe there's some products that we do care somewhat. Let's think of maybe tomato soup. Well, I think of Campbell's tomato soup. Campbell was a giant advertiser when I was a kid. But then I think of Progresso soup, and I actually find there's a tomato soup that they sell at Trader Joe's. I think it might just be Trader Joe's brand that I think is a really good one. I have a little bit of connection with those. We would call that a medium brand engagement. I'm not fully vested in it, but I have some knowledge of it. And then if we look at high brand engagement, that means we've got a lot of interest in it. I might join their social media. I might want to be friends with them. I might share the content that they push out. Guy Kawasaki was a guy, he's pretty popular in social media. You guys might have seen him. I think he's a big guy for Motorola phones right now. But he wrote a book. He was one of the early marketing managers at Apple Computers during the very early days, at Macintosh, I should say. And he came up with this term of brand evangelists. And one of the things that Apple did early on was they went out to a whole bunch of computer nerds and they said, we're coming out with an entirely new computer system and we're looking for people to help us. They were actually one of the first companies to make active use of beta testers. And they got a lot of people to test their computers. And they gave them computers. And they gave them access to their code so they could write programs. And they got people early on. IBM didn't give away any of that, and that was their biggest competitor. But Apple did. And they had conferences, and they gave these people T-shirts and sweatshirts. And these people really started liking Apple. And they became what Guy Kawasaki referred to as brand evangelists. I mean, I'm sure maybe you are a brand evangelist for certain brands, but I'm sure you know people who just live and breathe certain brands. My wife's family, when they bought their trucks, their pickup trucks, and all the guys in their family had pickup trucks, they bought Ford. They did not buy Chevrolet. They just thought Ford was so much better. I'm not sure I know that there's much difference between Ford and Chevy when it comes to things like pickup trucks. They look a little different, but I don't know that much. But if somebody has very high brand engagement, the high brand engagement means they either hate it a lot or they love it a lot. If you can find the people that love it, they're going to work hard to try and help you sell it. This is the image that the textbook has. They call it a brand engagement pyramid. And basically the takeaway of this is when you are creating a marketing program for a brand, Just make sure you have an understanding of who has high engagement, who has medium engagement, and who has low engagement. It's just kind of common marketing sense. You want to identify the people who really know you and like you. You want to identify and know the people who don't know you so that you can tailor the messages accordingly. Sorry, straight out of the textbook. Concept, I think I mentioned this earlier in the semester, but if I didn't, it's a good one to know right now. A new way of us looking at sort of different types of marketing communications and promotion. We'll often refer to this as paid media, owned media, and earned media. Paid media is where you pay for advertising, search advertising, display advertising, social media advertising, email. If you actually pay a blogger or an influencer to talk about your product. In-app advertising, that's paid media. Owned, that's a little different if you think about it. Oh, a company can own their own website. They do own their own website. They might own many websites. They own that media. It means they have complete control over it. Their social media is also owned. Now, technically, one could argue that Facebook owns your Facebook page, but you are the controller of your Facebook page. And things like if you create a mobile app as a company, you own that. And then the third category is earned media. Earned media. The easiest way to think of that is things like public relations and publicity, where you're trying to get people to like you. And if a magazine decides to write an article about your new product, you earned that media. And know that when we are creating a mix of marketing to promote our brands, we should probably look at a mix of paid media, owned media, and earned media. So it's really the same things that we talked about in the last chapter, just looking at it a slightly different way. In this chapter, there's a pretty extensive discussion on social media. Obviously, there's a lot of things that we can look at. What I would like you to think about is if you think about social media as a way of marketing a product, I want you to be very careful of your media bias. Just because you like Snapchat does not mean it's a good place to advertise. It might be a good place to advertise, but as somebody who is planning a marketing campaign, you need to be able to divorce yourself of those things that you like and accept that they might not be liked by everybody. I have the problem being at the very tail end of the baby boom. We were all television. We were a television generation. And that means I have a proclivity to think of television campaigns first. You guys have grown up during digital marketing times. So whenever I ask students to create a campaign, they almost always start with digital and they start with social media. Well, another thing that I want you to think of in terms of using social media to market is different social media has different benefits. Facebook has a broad demographic. One of the reasons a lot of younger people don't love Facebook is because your moms are on it, your aunts and uncles are on it. And it's like, I don't really want to go where mom is. Now, 10 or 15 years ago, the way students would get around that is they'd have two Facebook accounts, the one that mom would be friends with you on, and then the one that mom wouldn't know about. One of the good things about Facebook is you can create content that can be relatively long format, still photographs, numerous ones, and video. Twitter has the benefit of sort of having a fast connotation, a news-like connotation. You tend to not look back at Twitter 3 months from now. You can see Facebook posts that go on and get commented on day after day, week after week, and they go on. Twitter is a little bit more, I sometimes refer to Twitter as hit and run. It's kind of like you put a tweet out and then you move on to your next one. And we might look back a couple days if we haven't spent much time on Twitter, but we don't really go back 2 or 3 months. You know, I'm going to go back to May and let me just look at all the tweets in May and then let me look at them in June. We don't do that. Twitter tends to be very fast, very sort of localized in time. A lot of people don't think of YouTube as social media, but it's very much a social media. Social media can be defined as being user-generated content. People connect on YouTube. People comment on YouTube. People create content on YouTube. It's a social media. And it's the home of where a lot of our videos live. Even if we place the video on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, it's often housed or served on YouTube. LinkedIn is kind of the professionals media. LinkedIn was always much more about business. LinkedIn has become huge in the last couple of years. A lot of advertising money, a lot of trade advertising money is pouring into LinkedIn. One of the things that has done that, job searches. LinkedIn has really moved ahead in terms of finding jobs, placing ads for jobs, responding to job postings. Instagram, now Instagram originally had very short content. It was primarily stills. You couldn't even do video in the early days. Video was limited to being very short in the early days. It's longer now. Instagram is also owned by Facebook, so there's a lot more integration. Some people say Instagram is starting to look too much like Facebook, or Facebook is looking too much like Instagram. But Instagram still is very visual by comparison. You don't see long Instagram posts. So I find that Instagram kind of lives in a zone between Twitter and Facebook. Twitter being sort of short format, Facebook being, it can be long format, doesn't have to be. Now, Snapchat is one of those where we saw a huge influx of people into Snapchat over the last 5 or 7 years. We've seen money kind of go into it. Unfortunately, we've also seen a lot of money kind of go, we're not seeing the response there. So there's a lot of question as to where Snapchat is going. I actually have a couple former students that work at Snapchat, and one of my questions to them is kind of, where is it going? TikTok's kind of the big one right now. TikTok is in the news right now because they're looking at selling off the US portion of it. Microsoft was looking to buy it. That bid was turned down. Oracle, the big tech giant, looks like they're going to be taking over TikTok in the US. TikTok will likely do a public offering of stock. It will likely be huge when they do it. TikTok hasn't monetized themselves as much as other social media yet, but give them time. Now, another thing about social media that I want you to be careful of in terms of marketing is it can change rapidly. You guys have seen the advent of things like Snapchat and TikTok. During your life, you've seen changes to things like Twitter and Instagram. But I will tell you, when I was teaching in 2005, 2006, and I started teaching at the university level, all my students were talking about MySpace. I was like, what is MySpace? And they said, oh, you can go there and talk, and you can share what music you like. And I remembered thinking at the time, what a colossal waste of time. Like, who would ever want to do that? Well, I was wrong. A lot of people wanted to do that. Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace for $750 million back in about 2005, 2006. The very second semester that I was teaching, I had done a MySpace promotion for a client and it was very successful. And I was like, well, okay, maybe this is kind of interesting. My students came in first week of class teaching advertising media. I happened to mention MySpace, and my student said, nah, you got to check out, and I still remember this. They said, you got to check out the Facebook. They didn't call it Facebook back then. They called it the Facebook. I said, what the heck is the Facebook? And they said, it's kind of like MySpace, but it's even better. In 1 year, we saw Facebook skyrocket, and we saw MySpace crumble. A few years later, MySpace sold for about $1 million. And nobody's been able to do anything with it ever since.
Wow.
Social media can change quickly and dramatically. So one of the things that I would say is, as you guys get out of school and begin looking at marketing, stay focused on what's happening on social media. The experts in social media marketing will not look like me. They will look like you. You guys have a much, much closer view of this. And so you need to look for the things on how do you use those in a way of building brand equity. But the main thing is each one of them is different. I will also tell you, so for example, with my bicycle client, our downhill racing team is primarily Facebook driven in social media with some Instagram. Our BMX freestyle team is primarily Instagram and some Twitter. That's our BMX freestyle team. Our BMX race team is Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And when you look at our competitors, sometimes they use the same social media, but sometimes a competitive product, their followers are all in a different social media. So one of the things that I suggest is that you not push a social media on your customers as much as find out what your customers are using for social media and follow them there. And it's a strategy of going where they are rather than trying to force them to go someplace they're not comfortable with. But you guys can be experts in that much, much better, much more quickly than I can. So, you know, some of the other things that are happening right now in digital marketing, I've mentioned all of these before tonight. Well, most of these before tonight. And again, mobile marketing is really, it's really a little bit of a misnomer. That term is a little bit used a little bit incorrectly. Mobile marketing really is, we're talking about types of marketing that can be done on a mobile device. Now, about the only thing that is really truly mobile only are mobile apps that can not be used on a computer, but only on a mobile device. My main thing on that is I'm not trying to poo-poo mobile marketing at all, but it's kind of like saying television advertising, that's the medium where it's transmitted. Mobile is the medium through which those ads are transmitted. Mobile marketing, much of mobile marketing is still coming through the internet. So I think of mobile marketing as a subset of internet advertising. Content marketing. So the textbook really doesn't go too deep into this, but we've seen the rise of influencer marketing. We've seen the fall of some types of influencer marketing because there's not as much, what was expected early on is there was a lot of trust. And all it took was for, you know, one of the Kardashians to do a Twitter post or an Instagram post that had blank spaces left in it because it was bought and paid for post. And some people lost trust in that. But the flip side of it is if you can get a popular celebrity to say they like a product, it might create huge amounts of sales. Content marketing is slightly different than in content marketing. It's the company that's putting that information out. I would say 5 years ago, a company didn't have to be very aggressive in content marketing. I see that changing a lot right now. Companies are putting a lot more value into what goes on their website, on their blogs, and in their social media. And I put all of those under the umbrella of content marketing. Know that you can also use what we'll refer to as affiliate marketing. Affiliate marketing might be, you'll see this a lot with people, say bloggers. I follow a number of photography bloggers, and they will do affiliate marketing where they will talk about a product and they will say in the article, just so you know, I'm giving my true opinion of this product, but they are an affiliate of mine, which means if you buy this product on a website, I get a very small percentage. You've probably seen blogs where they mention something like that. They refer to that as affiliate marketing. In essence, they're working as a sales rep. And if you buy a product through somebody else, but it comes through your link, you get that money. That's affiliate marketing. Another thing that we're seeing somewhat online is we're seeing, I'm not sure if it's more or not. I kind of think it's more, but the idea of co-branding, of brands online linking up with each other. So you'll sometimes find this with product companies and event companies, and they might create micro websites or they might use each other's websites to cross-market their own products. You see this a lot with sponsorships now, that a product might be sponsored and featured on website, and then that same company is featured back on the sponsoring company's website. And we'll refer to that as co-branding of a product or of a service. Honestly, the experiential, the brand amplifiers, that's all just sort of repeated again, and we've already covered that. So effectively, the digital marketing, which I personally think is the fastest growing area, it's a little shorter chapter in our textbook, but know that from my perspective, it is no less important. We're going to spend more time talking about some digital marketing in the second half of the semester, but this is kind of where we get to in the textbook right now. So with that, I am going to stop talking for a moment. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to ask if you guys have any questions on that. Any questions on anything we went over? So tonight was a little bit more kind of straight out of the book. I needed to kind of plow through these, so we're kind of caught up now. Here's your homework assignment. I would like you guys to look at one advertisement and one non-advertisement. One advertisement and one non-advertisement. By non-advertisement, it could be PR, it could be a promotion, it could be coupons, could be a website, could be social media. But my suggestion, you don't have to do it on the brand you're doing research on, but I'm giving this to you as a gift. Do it on the brand that you're doing research on. Look at one advertisement and one other type of marketing communications. And I want you to tell me, here, let me get my notes real quick from this. And what I want you to tell me is, how does this advertisement support the brand? What brand elements does it have in it? So if you look at, for example, a video commercial or a print ad, you might say it's using the logo, it's using the color palette, it's using some of the language that we've seen in other media. So I want you to find an advertisement from your brand and then just do a quick analysis of it and say, what is it about this ad that really embodies the brand? And if it doesn't embody the brand, that's what I want you to tell me. So if you were to find a Nike ad that doesn't look like a Nike ad, doesn't use the Nike swoosh, I'd want you to tell me that. But more likely, with most of the brands that you guys have picked, they all tend to be very good brands, very good advertising. And I just want you to try and identify those key brand elements, which you've already done one homework assignment on, but how are those elements embodied in the advertisement? And then just find one other thing. It might be their website, it might be their social media, and how does their brand come alive in this? Here's what I'd like you to do with this homework. I don't really need to give you too much more. I have a little bit more explanation that'll be on the post on Moodle. My expectation for this homework is it should take an hour or less. This is not a long homework assignment. It should take 1 hour or less. It should take about 1 or 2 pages. And of that, I'd like you to cut and paste the ad, whatever ad you find, or a link to the commercial if it's a commercial, and put that in there. So I'm not looking for a long explanation. I simply want you to, now that you've been studying a brand, to look at one of their advertisements and say, ah, now that I've studied this brand and I understand more of what this brand identity is, how does that come out in their advertising? Is it the logo? Is it the jingle? Is it the spokesperson? Is it the kind of language they use? So I want you to do one ad and one non-ad, anything else that's related to that brand. So you could do a blog, you could do a social media account of your brand, you could do their website, you could do press releases that maybe you found, posters that you found, sponsorships that they do, anything other than an advertisement. Easiest advertisements to do, if you can find it, are print, even though that sounds a little boring, but print doesn't move. It's really easy to study and kind of look at. Commercials take a little bit more. You might have to watch the commercial a few times to really understand what are the brand elements on that. And then once you have written those would actually work really well in your paper. And so the homework that you're doing is going to be like a page and a half probably in the paper that you're going to be turning into me in a week. So I will have this posted. I apologize that I screwed up on the last one, but I will have this posted on Moodle for you guys. Any questions on this homework assignment? With that, I'm going to say thank you guys. This did take a tad longer than I meant for it to, but we're getting out right about at 9 o'clock. So I'm not going any longer than that. Thank you for being here tonight.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it possible that you extend the deadline for the paper?
So as of right now, I'm not going to extend it for the paper. I still want that due in a week. We've had it for a little while. You guys should have been doing some research on that. So as of right now, if you don't turn it in on time, it will get marked down. It typically doesn't get marked down a lot, but I will only accept it up to 1 week late. So unless there's a fire, a flood, or a natural disaster that affects all of us, I'm not going to extend that one. Any other, and no, I'm around all this week. I'm not traveling at all. So if you have any questions or any issues, I've had a few of you email me some questions on stuff. Please feel free to do that. I will be checking my email pretty frequently this week. But if you have questions, let me know. And if there's no more questions, I'll stay on here for a minute if anybody wants to stay on for a question, but we're done. We're dismissed. Let's go home. Let's go watch TV. Let's go have a little fun. And I will see all of you guys in 1 week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Certainly.
Professor, I have a quick question.
Sure.
It was just kind of like a random one about the Facebook group. So I was reading that we had to do like a discussion post. So I did one because I had understood that from the first sentence where it says post one brand marketing related article or analysis and link 3 times before the midterm, please comment and respond. Okay. And then it says for the article links you post, write a brief paragraph to summarize the key points and then pose a question. So I did that. And then it says for an analysis, post a link to an example of a brand you think is strong and killing it in brand equity. And you didn't say really to write much for that. That's more like a picture. Do we choose what kind, like 3 of each, or is it like 2 articles and 1 analysis? Like I was kind of confused.
You could do any combination. I really just opened it up so that all I really want out of that is for you to find things that are related to brands that are being published out there and then just post them on social media with a small bit of commentary.
Okay.
And so that's why I say I've had students do really interesting articles out of things like Adweek or the New York Times,
Yeah.
or Forbes or Fast Company, and it's an interesting article about how a brand is doing something. But I've also had students that just found like really cool commercials or ads, some of them that have been very unique and different, for example, during COVID. And then you might just put that up there and say, I think they did a great job, or I think the brand is really supported by this ad. Or you might say, I think this is a terrible ad for this brand because it completely makes us change the way we think. You have your complete choice of any or all of the above. You can do them all one way, do them all another way. That's totally up to you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was it.
Okay, and then what I really want is for you to do a couple of those and then comment on other people's.
Yes, yeah. I saw that.
And the comments don't have to be much.
Okay.
I mostly do that as an excuse to make you go check it every once in a while.
Yeah. Okay.
Okie doke.
Okay, thank you. And then our midterm is not like next week. It's in like 2 weeks, right?
I think it's 2 weeks. It's definitely not next week.
Okay.
And if it was, I'd be postponing that for sure.
Okay, yeah, because I know we have to do like that study review session before, right?
Yeah, and that will be the only thing we will do that night. There will be no new material that night, and I will give you a study guide.
Okay, perfect.
And just so you know, I work very hard to try and be very fair. And so I don't trick people on tests. If you talk to anybody who's at my class, the review session, I don't always know what I'm going to ask for the review, but the review actually helps me figure out what's going to be on the test. So I'm very honest when people say, will this be on the test? If I know it, I'll tell you. And if I don't, I'll say, I don't know, but this is a good one to study. I'll telegraph. And as much as what I tell about what will be on the test, I'll also try to tell you the things that won't be. So with this class and this textbook, and the fact that I'm posting my notes on these, will everything come out of my notes? The answer is no, but the vast majority of it, probably 90%, will come out of those topics.
Okay.
And maybe 100%. But I usually go through the textbook again before the midterm to see if there's something we talked about but I didn't have in my notes. But for the most part, I'm going to guide you pretty carefully because my goal on this is that I want you guys to learn important things that you can use in jobs. So we do have to learn a little bit of theory, and if you were to go on to grad school, some of these theories would be a little bit more important than if you're working. But for the most part, I'm trying to teach you guys stuff that I've learned that you guys will get to use in your jobs.
Yes, exactly. Okay, cool.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we'll see you next week.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Professor, I have a question if you
Yeah.
have time.
Sure.
So I am currently a senior student and expected to graduate in April,
Mhm.
21. And I've been looking for internships a lot, and with everything, it was a challenge even before the pandemic, and right now it's just impossible.
Yeah.
And I am just like I want to know if you have any suggestions, any advice I can do to overcome this.
So your question is not, you are not alone in this question. I spoke to probably 3 other students this week at 2 other schools, all asking the same question. And it's a challenge. I will freely admit, you're a senior during a really rough year. But that being said, I was on a phone call with the head of internships for Pepperdine, and she's actually she's head of internships in communications. And she's actually one of the teachers there, but she's also the internship coordinator. And we were just on a department, phone call. And what she said was actually quite encouraging. And she said, basically every internship stopped and dried up in March, April, but starting in May, some of the companies actually started contacting her and saying, we're going to have interns again in the fall, but they'll be remote. So that was the first good sign. Then what she said is starting in about July, they started rewriting what they're going to be doing on their interns. They kind of had to figure out, how do we do internships if they're going to be remote? And the last that I heard is that students are starting to get placed in internships right now. It's very difficult. I'm not going to try and say it's easy at all. So one of the things that I would say is perseverance. I know it's disappointing, but you got to apply for them, you got to push, and you got to keep doing it. Because if you don't, you're not going to get in line for those. Second thing is, I think what you submit as a resume and a cover letter are more critical than ever before. And I don't know that we have this class, because it's only 2.5 hours. I don't know that, I'm going to do something here real quick. Sorry, hang on for me for just a second.